Hello, my name's Heather Champion. I'm a psychotherapist living and working in Palm Beach County. I've started this GoFundMe page to help me raise money for a project near and dear to my heart. It's called My Tree Insight-Oriented Psychotherapy. But before I tell you about My Tree, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Long Island. I graduated in 1994 from Bellport High School. At that time, I was set to go off and become an architect. I had majored in art and design through much of high school, but knew I wasn't talented enough as an artist to make it my full-time job. My dream of being an architect lasted until I arrived in my first calculus class at Lehigh University. After failing for the first time at something in academia, I decided architecture was probably not for me. I switched majors to something that did not involve calculus, psychology. It lasted at Lehigh until the end of my freshman year and decided not to go back.
I enrolled at Stony Brook University as a temporary move until I decided what I really wanted to do. The plan was to transfer to another school after my sophomore year. But as luck would have it, I landed in one of the best schools for psychology at the time and never looked back. I even got to work in the lab of Dr. Ted Carr.
At that time, ABA therapy was all the rage in the world of psychology, and I wanted to get involved.
My plan at that time was to enroll in the PsyD program at Hofstra University for developmental psychology. But my mom convinced me to go out into the working world and get a job for a few years. I ended up working for a background investigation company. It was called Proudfoot Reports, and they were part of a larger industrial organizational psychology company called ASI. After a while at Proudfoot, I decided to look into getting an MBA, but then I discovered that an MBA was far away off from my psychology roots, and I'd have to eventually go back and get another bachelor's degree in order to enroll in an MBA program. I decided against it, and then I stumbled upon the industrial organizational psychology program at Hofstra University, and I decided to enroll. Midway through my time working on my degree, a couple of things happened. On September 11th, 2001, the world changed for everybody, especially those of us living in the New York tri-state area. I left Proudfoot and found my way to a startup company in the auto insurance world. At the time, the company was called General Assurance Company, but it later became known as Auto and Insurance.
I stayed at Auto One through the end of my master's program and eventually landed in the IT department working as a business analyst.
I used my master's in I/O, analyzing workflow and trying to streamline processes using technology. I was pretty good at my job and ended up spending around 6 years at Auto One before moving on to a much larger company called Marsh & McLennan Companies.
I was hired there as an IT consultant, but after six weeks on the job, I was given a full-time position as vice president of variable compensation unit. I ran the commission bonus system for all U.S. employees. It was a job I hated, but brought about a turning point in my life.
I got an office with a door. Up until that point, I had been working in cubicle farms with very little privacy. I kept finding my colleagues and my staff coming into my office all hours of the day and just sitting and talking. It was nearly impossible to get my work done. This job was also the first time I had to take the Long Island Railroad to get to work every day. And I kept finding that after a long day in the office, people would come and sit with me on the train and just tell me about their day. When they got to their stop, they'd get up and say, "Thank you very much," and get off the train. I joked around my boss at the time and told him that I felt like Lucy from Peanuts on the train. We thought maybe I needed to change careers, and then I started to investigate becoming a counselor.
I eventually left Marsh and New York City for another job as a BA in the IT department of a manufacturing company.
I promised myself that if this job didn't work out, I'd enroll in a counseling program and pursue a new career. As luck would have it, the manufacturing company decided to close my office, and I took this as a sign from God and enrolled in the mental health counseling program at the Derner Institute of Advanced Psychological Studies at Delphi University.
While all this was happening in my professional life, I also went through a transformation in my personal life. My health started to fail around the age of 30, and nobody could figure out what was wrong. I started doing yoga regularly and made a lot of great friends through my classes.
I also started going to the gym and working out a lot and working with a functional nutritionist. It turned out I was suffering from a metabolic issue that stemmed from an overtaxed adrenal gland. Yoga in the gym really helped me to find my emotional balance, and that in turn helped me to see where I wanted to go with my career next.
Started the program at Delphi with the intention of studying how yoga and exercise affect emotional processing in the brain. I used every opportunity to dig into the tiny amount of research on yoga, exercise, and psychology. I also got my 200-hour yoga teacher certification, fitness trainer certification, and a certification in trauma-sensitive yoga. In the second year of the program, I started an internship at a general mental health clinic on Long Island's East End. The vast majority of our clients were on Medicare and presented several limitations both physically and financially.
I knew yoga practice would help them enormously, but couldn't teach yoga in that setting. and many of the clients were physically unable to engage in the practice. I decided to combine a hatha yoga class with an existential psychology group. Each week in the group, we focused on a breathing exercise, a gentle bodywork exercise, and a meditation. We called the group My Tree Group. Each group began with a reciting of a mantra meditation, which is called the Blessing of Loving Kindness, that I had learned in my yoga teacher training. I helped the members of the group learn to calm their psyches, to tie their reactions to the exercises to how they reacted to things in real life.
Just before completing my licensing hours in New York, I took a leap of faith and left my beautiful island for the world of endless summer and found myself in the epicenter of the opiate crisis. I quickly found work in the inpatient detox residential unit of a large treatment organization here in Palm Beach County. I quickly recognized a systematic issue with all of my clients and began re-implementing safety planning to prepare them for less intensive levels of care.
They couldn't predict their own reactions. They had no ability to effectively read their surroundings or their own physiological responses to their surroundings. This left them susceptible to emotional pain and re-experiencing of past pain and trauma. I quickly started developing interventions and worksheets to give my clients, and then turn the interventions into standardized workbooks that I gave to every client. As time went on and I received more and more feedback, I refined the exercises in the workbooks more and more.
I changed jobs a few times after arriving in Palm Beach and obtaining my Florida mental health counselor's license. But in all my work, I noticed the same pattern with all my clients, whether they had any specific trauma in their past or not. Their pattern of use appeared reflexive in nature, and while the clients were unable to predict the outcome of their behaviors, I could see the eventual outcome as clear as day. They were unable to see when they were uncomfortable and unable to describe what was happening to them. That left them unable to figure out when to use any coping skills we as clinicians tried to teach them. All in all, my first 3 years working in the substance abuse population in Palm Beach County, I worked with around 300 different individuals and their families.
I started to put together a theory that the use of what we were calling maladaptive coping strategies were actually adaptive to the individual's psyches. The adaptations had a purpose, generally to numb an emotional profile that the individual becomes so habituated to suppressing that they were completely unable to identify when it was happening. But they noticed the sensations in their body that caused them to feel physically uncomfortable. So the use of the coping strategies was adapted to lessen the impact of the physical discomfort associated with the emotional profile, whether consciously or not. Because these individuals had become so habituated to the action of use, it was kicked off automatically. They had no control over their actions. Many people described their relapses or their uses as an out-of-body experience where they consciously knew what was happening, but it felt like another force was controlling their
When
body.
we were able to pinpoint the profile of emotions that appeared to kick off the automatic processes, we were able to also pinpoint where the difficulty with those emotions came from. Some were able to identify a specific incident, others identified the profile of emotions as a frequent experience that resulted from regular childhood experiences. Once they were able to identify the profile, they could look back over the other experiences and note when the profile got them into trouble. They were also able to predict when they might come up again. As they grew more proficient at error processing and planning, my clients became much more emotionally stable and less likely to use.
Because identifying the profile of emotions appeared to be such a big part of how I was helping my clients, I started to really work on refining my technique and helping my clients develop a sense of agency or control. Instead of telling them what I saw in them, I helped them to identify what they saw in themselves. Occasionally, I would challenge their appraisals of their reactions by sharing how I might feel if I was in a similar situation.
My colleagues started to refer to me as the miracle worker, and I regularly received the more difficult clients in our census. Several colleagues inquired about what I exactly do with the clients to get them to change so much while in treatment. A few asked me to train them, and that's where the idea for the training program came from.
Essentially, I'm asking you to help me fund my project to build a training program for psychotherapists to teach them how to better help their clients. I've been working for years on refining my technique and researching the different concepts behind why this is so successful and so powerful. I've created a theory of why people engage in impulsive activities, where this all comes from, and how to effectively change those behaviors. I want to do more research to increase my understanding of behavior and neuroscience. I want to partner with universities to test my theories and my techniques.
I want to help people, and like I said earlier, leaving a life in IT to become a counselor was the worst financial decision of my life. My funds are limited at best, and I keep finding myself chasing my own tail trying to stay afloat. Building this training program and finding institutional partners will cost money that I simply do not have and am likely to come across unless I put aside my own pride and ask for your help. In an effort to secure the needed funding, I've applied for a federal SBIR grant. My application is grant 128265154, and you can look it up on grants.gov for more information.
I wrote the grant to help me fund the psychotherapist training program for My Tree Insight-Oriented Psychotherapy. This GoFundMe is to help with some of the miscellaneous costs that the grant will not cover. I chose the name My Tree, MYTREE, as a take on the Sanskrit word Maitri, MAITRI. It means universal loving kindness with the self, and it's pronounced like my tree. Also, in My Tree Insight-Oriented Psychotherapy, I incorporate a lot of yogic philosophy, and the foundation of yogic philosophy is the 8 limbs of yoga. They are broken down into the roots of how to live a happy and healthy life, building strength through exercise and breath, and uniting all in focus such that we have insight. Our roots are the ethical observances and abstinences. Examples include being kind, being truthful, acceptance, self-discipline, lust for life, dedication, and self-education. According to yogic philosophy, living these concepts will provide us with the nutrients we need for a happy and fulfilling life. They will also provide us with grounding and roots. Without these things, we cannot effectively care for ourselves or for others. We cannot focus and we cannot grow, much like a tree cannot grow without strong roots. These concepts are paramount to My Tree Insight-Oriented Psychotherapy. In the years since I've been doing this work, I've recognized the pattern of shame and guilt, and to a large extent, our current system of treatment and culture further creates a sense of shame and guilt to those who engage in what we refer to as maladaptive coping strategies. In My Tree Insight-Oriented Psychotherapy, we don't look at those coping strategies as maladaptive. We view them as a necessary adaptation to another situation, another time and place, and unfortunately doesn't work in the current situation. Through a series of exercises, we help individuals to observe their actions and learn about themselves such that they can plan for the future and creating a tree of wisdom. The tree of wisdom is an outline of acceptance and preparation for eventual difficult times. Part of the exercises is working to reunify the sensing part of the brain with the thinking part of the brain. I have a hypothesis that regular experiences where an individual is forced to suppress acknowledging their emotions or the physical sensations associated with those emotions causes the brain to basically cut ties between the sensing and thinking parts of the brain. Essentially, practice makes perfect. As this is continually practiced, the ability to sense the environment and make sense of, as well as sense what's happening internally, goes away. Theoretically, those who engage in impulsive and harmful activities have a disconnect between their interoceptive awareness and neuroception. Interestingly, much of the neuroscience research I've reviewed regarding error processing, planning, interoceptive awareness, and neuroception identify the insular cortex as a brain region tied to all of them. Through building a tree of wisdom, an individual will review past experiences and errors and then use that information to plan for the future. But they're also going to identify these particular emotions or emotional profile that played a big part in the poor decision making. Then they will also work on identifying the physical manifestations of those emotions, as well as how they typically act in those situations. Interestingly, much of the neuroscience research I've reviewed regarding error processing, planning, interoceptive awareness, and neuroception identify the insular cortex as a main part of the brain that's operating in all of these. Through building the tree of wisdom, an individual will review their past mistakes and work to identify the specific emotions or emotional profile that play a large part in the poor decision making. Then they will reflect on the physical manifestations of those emotions and how they typically act in those situations. After they're able to identify all of those elements, we start to begin planning and thinking about how those elements could come up again for them. So there is a chance that through the guided error processing and observing, we are starting to recalibrate the brain and reconnect interoceptive awareness with neuroception, such that individuals are better able to observe the internal processing they have become so accustomed to suppressing, and then they can react in healthier ways. The neuroscience testing part of my theory is something I can't test at this point in time. Maybe with the help of those of you out there, I can. For now though, all I'm asking for is some seed money to supplement my grant request to help other psychotherapists learn how to use the tools I've developed to help more people. My Tree can be implemented institutionally with individual therapists. There are some contraindications regarding level of care and stability, and understanding how and when to implement these strategies is very important. If you would like more information on my research, My Tree of Wisdom, or My Tree Insight-Oriented Psychotherapy, please contact me at heather@mytree-therapy.com. Thank you for watching this video and for your support. Namaste.